Okay, so here we go. We are on the verge of the first of the consortium debates, and tonight will be the French debate, tomorrow the English debate. So I think, we'll confine ourselves to what's in front of us in terms of what we can or should expect, and I would only say that we can or should expect things to be fairly volatile. Dave Trafford here with John Wright. It is the Writ Race. This has been the daily effort to stay on top of the Canadian election campaign. We're pleased to welcome in this afternoon Warren Kinsella. How are you, Warren?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. And I know, we talked to you about joining the show a few days back, and that's great, and it was kind of fell on this day, and I'm glad it did pre-debate. Just based on your experience in war rooms, strategy, advising leaders, etc., what's going on in the prep rooms right now? We're a few hours away from this, particularly considering the distinction that we have in this campaign of it being over sort of the COVID background and all of this, plus this level of anger that we're seeing out on the campaign that's sort of bubbling to the surface as an uncontrollable issue.
Well, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of questions there. In terms of the debate, so my background is I worked with various prime ministers and premiers and party leaders, getting them ready for debates, whether it's for a general election or, a leadership debate or so on. So I've done a lot of them over the years. What I've learned is they get overanalyzed. I actually think they're kind of simple. Firstly, if they're on TV is about pictures, as you guys know, and, it's an emotional medium. So what you're trying to do is connect with people kind of at a gut level. TV is not a intellectual medium. So it's as one premier once said to me, it's 70% how you look, 20% how you say it, and 10% what you actually say. So it's the visual. You want to look and sound like a prime minister or a president or a premier or whatever position you're running for. And the other thing is, I know those of us in the media sometimes think, well, everything's going to change after the debate and it's dramatic and so on. And sometimes they are. But generally, and certainly in a campaign like this one where the debates are happening so late, most people, Dave and John, have already made up their minds. Right. And most of the time they're just coming to the debates to get the choice they've already made ratified. They're not looking to get their minds changed. They're just they want to get confirmation that they made the right choice. So, the gettable votes for most debates, especially this one coming so late in such a short race, it's not very big. So, what I'm going to be looking for is what Justin Trudeau does to win, because at the moment he's losing, not by a lot, but he is losing, and he's got to figure out a way to get back. And, Aaron O'Toole, I think, is winning by not losing. So it's going to be an interesting debate.
Yeah, it's an interesting refrain we've heard almost from day one that no matter how O'Toole is performing, that phrase has come up. He's winning by not losing. He's winning by not being Andrew Scheer. He's winning by not stepping on the landmines that you might have otherwise expected him to do so. But it's almost as if he's kind of just standing still and letting the Liberals kind of back into him or go past him in reverse.
Yeah. I mean, governments defeat themselves is the old cliche, and I'm a big believer in that. And Justin Trudeau has been working busily at defeating himself since this thing was called. There's all kinds of stuff that's hurt him. Afghanistan, the fourth wave in the coronavirus pandemic, the wildfires in 3 different provinces, statistics on whatever issue. But the big thing is he called an election that nobody wanted. Before the campaign was even called, one pollster said that 40% of Canada, of respondents, were angry, quote unquote, at the notion of an election being called early. But he called it anyway. And, David Peterson in 1990 and Jim Prentice in 2014 could have both told him, if you call an election that early, you've got to have a really good reason for it. And he just didn't.
So when we look at this then, I mean, you talk about available votes. The margins are so slim, though, right now, and I would think, John, you would clearly have a sense of this as well, that whatever they can eke out in terms of a shift, as small as it might be significant, no?
That is true, for sure. You've got a lot of tight races happening, and the race itself is tight. But there is getting back to one of your earlier questions, like, every campaign, I guess I'm a cynical old guy, I always hear, it's, it's the ugliest campaign ever, and, it's the worst campaign ever, and the most personal, and, that kind of stuff gets said all the time. What I've found in this one is that the angry people, it's not that there's more of them, they always tend to be around the same number. They're just really organized, and they've used social media to monkey wrench a lot of Justin Trudeau's events. My suspicion is they're going to start doing the same sort of thing to Aaron O'Toole and Jagmeet Singh. They just don't like establishment politicians. They tend not to be ideologically aligned with anybody. They're mad. They're pissed off, and maybe the pandemic's done that to them. So they're lashing out. And so that's what I've been struck by. It's not their number, not by their anger, but by how organized they are.
John, you and Laura Babcock and I were talking about this yesterday, that sentiment that's out there. And, I know you have been watching it closely, where we have seen these attitudes kind of bubbling to the surface with not insignificant response in terms of support for certain ideas that are out there right now. And to Warren's point, might be a small group of well-organized people, but generally some of the attitudes that they're expressing are maybe even more broadly held.
Yeah, and I don't want to tread on what we did yesterday for our listeners, but I even took a deeper look today on some of the numbers that I've seen. So if you go to, and I want to specifically look at the People's Party of Canada, because I have a theory about it. If you go look back to anywhere between about July the 26th, around that date, the PPC is getting really no traction at all. I mean, they didn't have it in the last campaign, about 1% or so. And then you look at the aggregated numbers for polling, it starts to move around August the 26th. So about a month later, it starts to pick up. And in the last number of weeks, it's picked up even more. And then you start to ask yourself, well, what are the events that give that propulsion? And it is actually the introduction of passports. And passports have become a symbol. I mean, it's a difference between identity cards and a passport. A passport gives you access to things, and if you don't have one, you don't get in. And we see Quebec, where, in fact, a couple of weeks ago we had 50,000 people in the streets, wasn't widely reported in most of the media. We're now seeing this organized group. And what I noticed as well, I went and I looked at Maxime Bernier's the latest videos I could find of him in Manitoba talking to people. It's not about the Kelly Leach anti-immigrant stuff that we saw before. I mean, he's a bit of a Svengali when it comes to this, because what he's picking up is anger about people who believe that governments are keeping them out now. And I also noticed that these are families and that they're drawn through a wide stretch. I mean, there's no single demographic. This is not kind of a outlying young group of people. The demographic from my data table shows that they're right across the country. They're in all of the demographics. And I suspect, although I haven't seen it yet, but I suspect they're coming from all different parties. Because you and I and Warren know that there are intellectuals, highly educated people with good jobs, lawyers, and even doctors who are saying, I'm not going to get my vaccine. And what we've done is we've imposed a certain condition on them, saying, well, if you don't get it, then you don't get in the door. And in fact, some of you may lose your jobs. And I think what this is doing is the PPC is the only party that is providing them with a vessel to go ahead and actually find their place and their voice. And what Warren talks to is absolutely correct. You're starting to see it organized. It's the nebulous of both a party and a societal reaction to being on the outside. And I don't know where it's going to end up. But Warren, you probably agree with me. If you go from 0 to almost 7 or 8% in the polls inside of a couple of months, the only question you have now is durability. Is it going to continue to last? Because they didn't have signs or T-shirts before. Now they got signs. Now they got T-shirts. Now they're starting to coalesce. The only thing that's missing from this is a manifesto and the ability to kind of get traction and move forward. So I see it as, in the data, I can actually see something colliding with this group of people to make them motivated, and they're not getting a voice and they're not getting recognition for that voice at the moment. But I think that unless we start accommodating 14% or 4.5 million people in this country who are directly opposite what we think they should be doing in getting a vaccine, I think we're going to see a great disruption in this country.
Well, I don't want to talk about the People's Party because their leader is suing me at the moment. So I'm sorry, guys, I can't really do that. What I will say is that, I worked for Hillary Clinton 5 years ago, and I loved working for. I worked for her in a bunch of different states. I worked for her Brooklyn headquarters, and I did not see coming what happened. I know lots of people run around afterwards and say, "Oh, I saw it coming." I didn't, and so you learn the most in politics by your losses, not by your wins. And I read up on it and so on. What I found that there's for sure this minority that we're seeing on the campaign trail, throwing rocks and screaming and obscenities. They had predecessors in the Tea Party and Brexit, and then the Trump win in 2016. And if you look at them demographically, for sure, they're older men, high school education. There's some racism there, there's some misogyny there for sure. But they feel left behind. They feel left behind by cultural change and technological change and economic change and certainly political change. They feel like they're the forgotten. And so what they do is they express their upset about that, their hurt feelings about that, by being pissed off and breaking things and being angry. And then, along come politicians like Donald Trump or whoever who give them a vehicle and manipulate them and take advantage of them. So, if it sounds like I feel kind of sorry for them, I do. Because I think, you look at Trump, I mean, for sure, he lost to Joe, and I worked for Joe as well. But Trump got 70 million votes. So that constituency, those angry people, they're not going away. They're still there. We just, I think as a civil society, we owe it to ourselves, in our self-interest, to find out why are they so pissed off, and what can we do to make them feel part of democracy? Because democracy depends on it.
It's really foreign to have this kind of pushback at this temperature in this country, Warren. And I'd be interested in you commenting on this, because I was watching American television today and I saw, a sheriff standing outside of a school. Inside the doorway was a principal with a mask on, basically saying, you can't come in without a mask. I've got hundreds of kids who are masked up, and on the outside are a bunch of kids who don't have masks on, and their parents are behind them, and the kids and the parents are like, let us in. And the sheriff basically says, I can't do anything about this. I can't enforce this. And I'm wondering whether or not we're at the stage, because the pandemic is now slicing along important lines in this country. And as I say, there are people who may be excluded from going to school. I mean, we got a lot of people who are in favor of doing that. But what do you do with those people? What I thought I saw today was kind of like, okay, well, if you're Protestant and Catholic, you get separate school boards. But if we're going to have a pandemic that lasts for months, if not years, and these beliefs hold, do you not try and find other ways to figure out how to put these people in a school and put these people and say, look, I'm demanding that you come into work, but I'm going to have to accommodate you because of this? Because I don't know how you reconcile this unless there's some give in the system.
Honestly, I'm going to sound like I'm disagreeing again, and I guess I am. And maybe it's because I'm an old fart or whatever. But, I remember when I worked for Mr. Chrétien in opposition, I was his special assistant. And I remember looking across Wellington Street in Ottawa on the hill one day. There were 40,000 farmers there. And some of them were carrying around, fake nooses for Brian Mulroney. So anger in politics is nothing new, right? It's been around for a long time. My boss, Chrétien, he was on Parliament Hill, and a couple of guys tried to assault him, and it resulted in the Shawinigan handshake, and it was kind of funny. But subsequently somebody broke into their house and Mrs. Chrétien dispatched them using a sculpture. Also kind of funny, but it's always been there. Always been there. This is like, I know the media, those of us who work for the media and love the media, we kind of get these notions that something's brand new and it's never happened before in the friggin' universe. And it has. This has happened before. It's just my personal view is that they're quite organized. They know how to use social media. They know how to monkey wrench events. My strong suspicion is that they've got somebody who's leaking information about where these campaign events are taking place. And that's worrisome because somebody's going to get badly hurt. But, in terms of the notion that anger is new to politics or extreme expressions of it, I just don't believe it. It ain't true.
Well, let me suggest then, though, that at least it is a distraction that we in the media are enjoying or embracing, and depending on how you want to look at it. But at the same time, if we look at the last 2 weeks, then, I mean, how does a campaign move forward where it's so tight? Let's face it, the Liberals, I can't imagine that they're going to be close to majority territory in the next 2 weeks, but, stranger things have happened. But how does a campaign focus itself to make sure that it comes out on top without being distracted by all the nonsense that's going on?
Well, let me answer that one by telling a story about somebody's dad who was at a parade in 1968. And there were a bunch of people on the podium and the parade's taking place. And the separatists came out and started throwing rocks and bottles at the people on the podium. And everybody left the podium. All of them got the hell out of there except for one guy. And that was Pierre Trudeau. And that was the Saint Jean Baptiste parade in June of 1968. And he turned that into a majority government. So getting back to the very first thing I said, TV is pictures, right? That was a politician taking a personal risk. Voters like it when politicians take a risk. They can sense when a politician is playing it safe. They don't like it when a politician plays it safe. They like politicians to take a risk. That's why they voted for guys like Trump. Even though he's an asshole, they knew that he was saying things that were risky to him politically. They dig that. They don't like it. I know we in the media always say, politician misspoke himself. And it's like, yeah, for sure. But Joe and Jane Front Porch are out there going right on. I'm glad somebody spoke their mind. To hell with the media. And it's the same thing here. I don't think these confrontations on the campaign trail are hurting Trudeau at all. They're making him look like a hero, like his dad did.
I'm interested, because you follow Quebec politics closely as well, what you expect out of the debate tonight. I can suggest that there's a few topics that were not discussed last time. I mean, you have the environment, you have child care, which will be brought up, and you'll have probably the assault rifle issue. What do you expect, and who do you think is going to benefit from that tonight?
Well, I watched the first French debate, which was TVA, and it was really well done, guys. I'm expecting the English debate's going to be a shit show again because they got too many people, and it's just it's one of those CBC deals where they try and satisfy everybody and end up satisfying nobody. So the TVA thing was really well done. What I was struck by was, Blanchet, it's his natural medium, so I wasn't surprised that he did really well. Trudeau, always in English, strikes me as a phony, but in French, he was really good. He was much more authentic and much more convincing. Because authenticity in debates, I always tell the people I coach, is really key. You need to form a connection with the viewer, and you do that by being authentic. But the guy who I thought was best, and a lot of the Quebec commentators felt the same way, was O'Toole, because his French was really good. So not only was he not doing what Anglophone leaders always do in the French debates, which is just play defense, right? They're goalies and they're trying to keep the puck from going in the net. He actually scored a bit. He went after Trudeau on the Me Too stuff. He went after Trudeau on the early election stuff. The other leaders did too. But he was comfortable enough in French to be aggressive. And you could tell all of the leaders were surprised by that. So I think O'Toole is going to do well in the French one. In the English one, if I were Trudeau, I'd go for broke. I would throw every goddamn thing I've got, including O'Toole's stupid flip-flop on the assault weapon thing. I would throw that at it. I'd jam that down his throat and make it so he can't talk, because that was a big mistake, and it's right in their platform.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments around the debate format. I mean, probably one of the worst things that we suffer through is the debate, and quite frankly, it's because it's the consortium. I'm assuming that you had to deal with the consortium at some point when you were prepping and so on.
Yep.
I mean, what a dog and pony show that is. It satisfies no one. So
it's like the Borg on Star Trek. It's resistance is futile. But you guys are both broadcasters. You know what I'm talking about. If you have too many people on stage and they're all trying to talk, nobody can hear anything. It becomes all noisy and cluttered. And that's the problem with the way they've done the English debates. The French one, was it Pierre Brunet from TVA? Man, that guy was a pro. He didn't break into a sweat. He kept control of the circumstances, but he let them all talk. And it was just, as I said, I watched every minute of it. And it was a really well done show. I'm not expecting that for the English one.
Well, but that's because they can focus, though. If you've got one host, you can focus and you can kind of pull a thread. And we understand that there are planned and, telegraphed questions and all that sort of thing prior to the show starting. But when you've got representatives from all various media outlets, they've all got their own axe to grind. And I never get a sense that we get to a point where we sufficiently deal with an issue. We run out of time and have to move on.
Yeah. No, it's like TV, like it's, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like the cliche goes, and that's what I always tell the people I coach for debates, is like, we do live in an era of the low information voter. They don't have a stomach for tons of statistics being thrown at them and crap like that. Like the best example I always give them is, the first debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. Barack Obama is a better performer and so on, but he'd been president for 4 years. So what does he do? He comes out and he's like the professor and practically looking at his watch, and he's, what am I doing here dealing with this idiot? And he's quoting statistics and numbers to people and kind of grumpy. And Mitt Romney, who's this vulture capitalist, I think he used the phrase middle-class families 14 times. He wouldn't know a middle-class family if it bit him on his ass. But he won the debate that night because he connected with people. And, Trudeau's really good at that. But what I've been surprised by in this campaign is that O'Toole's not bad at it either. So, I think Trudeau's got a really tough row to hoe because this debate's coming late. He's lost another week to it. And then it's like next week, guys, it's it, right? It's the end of we're coming to the end of the campaign. So, I don't know what Trudeau's got, but it better be something good because he's not doing well at the moment.
I'm curious because you've worked on so many different campaigns and you've seen it from the war room to the outside, but getting out the vote is the most important thing. That's what you work towards. How do you think the COVID issue is going to play out? And before you answer that, I mean, even in the city of Toronto, where you know it well, there's a whole school board that's basically said you can't come in here because your germs might hang in the air for the kids who go to school the next morning. I cannot see, hundreds of people showing up and being 6 feet apart and taking one step at a time and being in line for 2 hours. I mean, people are going to say, screw this and head home. But I think there's a difference between those who intend to turn out and those who actually turn up. How much do you think that's all of this is going to be affecting the outcome?
Well, just on the school thing, like I just don't. As you know, John, all my kids are grown now, but like I just, and I love Doug Ford, he's a friend, but I just do not understand this goddamn decision to send kids back to school. Because if you look at the statistics in Israel and the United States and so on, 30% of the COVID infections now are children. So I don't get it. But anyway, I've been wrong before, and hopefully I'm wrong about that. But, I think, where's this campaign going? I think we'll probably be back at it in 18 months, whether it's Prime Minister O'Toole or Prime Minister Trudeau. And it's just been, really unsatisfying. And it was completely unnecessary. Justin Trudeau was passing every goddamn piece of legislation. Nobody was stopping him. They were all afraid to. And he, the pandemic rendered his minority into a majority. He had a majority government. And this bullshit where he comes out at Rideau Hall and, blinking and is dewy-eyed and this is a pivotal election and it's consequential and all these other words you use. It's not true. It's not. And, I think the people are about to teach him a lesson. Question is whether they trust Aaron O'Toole enough to give him a clear mandate to be Prime Minister.
I want to circle back to a previous question because, again, I want your skill set here. How do you get the vote out in a circumstance where COVID and the voting booths themselves being eliminated from schools and not on campus and a bunch of you, as I said, you've been on the inside of all of these things, and you got to get the vote to show up. How do you do that, or what do you think we're going to see on election night given that circumstance?
Pandemics are good for progressive political parties, guys, and I speak from experience. I worked for Joe Biden. I couldn't cross the border. I worked for him for months. So what did Warren do? I did the phone bank every single night. I phoned hundreds of Americans in New England, in California, in Florida, and all that we did, night after night, call after call. Have you got your advance ballot yet? Have you gone to see the city clerk? Have you filled out the ballot? Did you put it in the one envelope? Did you sign the outside of that envelope? Did you put it in the big envelope? Do you want us to send somebody over to get it from you? Are you sure you voted? Can you check online? Would you like us to check online? Like, guys, we weren't calling people to say, we'll take you to the polling station. Our vote, the Democratic vote, believed in masks, they believed in social distancing, they believed in vaccines. And our opponents, helpfully for us, were a bunch of assholes who didn't. They didn't. So that was to our advantage. Like in Canada, mail-in balloting, as you guys know, is nothing new. We've had it for decades. We've had it for 25 years. So my expectation is, yeah, for sure, there's going to be people about, as they should be, nervous about going to, the local fire hall or whatever, which is where I'm voting. So they're going to do a mail-in ballot. It's really easy to do. It's easy peasy. So that's going to benefit Trudeau and Singh, not so much O'Toole, I think.
We're standing back looking at the top numbers and the pollsters are putting them out, regardless of what they are, and we're seeing this big horse race. But you've been in so many campaigns where the party's not looking at the big numbers, they're looking at the small numbers. I mean, it's a knife fight on the ground in a selected group of ridings. Where do you think battleground is tight between the Liberals and the Conservatives and maybe even the NDP? And how many ridings are they probably even looking at? Are they looking at 3 dozen out of all the seats, or are they looking at 100? Like, what's your sense of that dynamic right now?
Well, there's a bunch of questions in there. Like, where is it between the Tories and Liberals? It's 905 and Lower Mainland. And where is it between the Liberals and the NDP? It's certain ridings in Toronto and urban centres. Where is it between the Tories and the NDP? It's, maybe Manitoba, Lower Mainland. That's about it. But really, where the big number, which is the Tory number and the Liberal number, gets settled on election night, hopefully, is in 905 and Lower Mainland. Like Quebec, I actually don't see a whole bunch of movement. The Bloc may lose a few, but the Liberals, pick them up and vice versa. So that may turn out to be a wash. I don't believe any of this People Party bullshit. I think it's going to be the same thing as last time. And I don't think the NDP is going to break through there. Tories will pick up some seats in Atlantic. Trudeau, I don't know where he's going to find seats, guys, in Ontario. All I can see him doing is going down. I think Manitoba, it's just a couple Liberal seats there. They'll probably lose them, wiped out in the prairies, and then it's Lower Mainland. And the thing that I always say to my Tory friends, they get all excited, we're 4 points ahead in Nanos or Ecos or one of these firms. And I'm like, well, who cares? Like, you need more than that. You got wasted votes, boy, in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And just because you get 70% of the vote in Manitoba, it looks great in terms of your national number, as you say, John, but it doesn't do diddly, because you don't get awarded extra seats in Alberta. So right now, even though the Tories are, if you look at most of the polling that's being done with media firms, the media polls, even though the Tories are probably, 2, 3, 4 points ahead in most of them, that really means that they're tied in terms of seats. So honestly, I think a few days after election night, we're going to be looking at O'Toole being prime minister by virtue of 4 or 5 seats, or the reverse with Trudeau. And for guys like us, that's like heaven. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna be able to talk about this stuff. But your average person, they're gonna be pulling their hair out because it's gonna be pretty frustrating. But anyway, it'll be fun.
So either way, I mean, in that scenario that you describe, it's understandable that we will then be into another election cycle within the next 2 years because of the minority. Does Trudeau survive to run again in the next election?
Well, I don't know if he wants to. I'm a big fan of watching the behavior of politicians. It tells me more than a poll does. He's phoning it in, and I think he's used to having sunshine blown up his ass and everybody telling him how wonderful he is. But he hasn't been on the cover of Rolling Stone in a long time. I think that he is an unhappy looking customer, whereas Aaron O'Toole and Jagmeet Singh look like they're having a lot of fun. And, my experience is the guys and gals who are having fun are the ones who tend to do better. And Trudeau, I would not be surprised certainly if he ends up on the short end of seats to say, see you later, I'm going to leave, and he goes off to the United Nations or some damn thing, or writes his memoirs or whatever. I know somebody who talked to him, who's known him his whole life. And they said to him, and we'll just probably end things here, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You've effectively got a majority right now. The country is in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody wants this. Why are you doing this? And the answer that came from Justin Trudeau was, well, I really want a majority. Well, he ain't going to get a majority, and I'm not so sure he's going to get a minority either. So that's a guy I wouldn't be surprised to see heading off into the sunset. And good riddance.
I spent some time on a couple of the conservative campaigns on the plane and doing the cross country thing. You know what? And in both cases, Stephen Harper won. It never occurred to me, Warren, that he was having a good time.
Well, that guy's never had a good time. He takes showers with his clothes on. So, there you guys.
Great to have your insights on this. Thanks, Warren Kinsella. It's good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Warren Kinsella, I'm Dave Trafford. He's John Wright. This is the Writ Race. It's an Eye Contact podcast.